Hey everyone. The other week I joined a game jam, the IcoJam 2023. The ratings should all be in by now, but I'm recording this beforehand. If you'd like to try the game out for yourself, go check the link in the description. The game jam's theme was 3, 2, 1. I instantly thought of a countdown, and figured instead of making it a typical starter countdown, to make it constant throughout my game. This jam I wanted to challenge myself to do something new. I've worked with 2D pixel art before, and 3D low poly with Malorium. But aside from that, I haven't really left my comfort zone. This game jam was the perfect place for me to try this. Icoso makes his games using only shapes, and they turn out great and very polished. I wanted to try and do the same thing, with a little challenge for myself in there too. I've never touched 2D physics before, and the only time I've really worked with physics at all is in Malorium. I decided to make a top-down shooter using physics, basic shapes, and particles, which is something that I barely touched in Unity. I started the jam by doing the exact opposite of what I'd usually do, by creating the art style and some small polish. I didn't want to play in background, so I opened up Sprite and made a grid, which I could then repeat as my background. This already made the game look so much nicer. I then decided on having 4 entities in my game. The circle, which would be the player, and the triangle, square, and hexagon, that would be the enemies. I mostly just chose these shapes because Unity has preset shape sprites that I could use. I threw a colour on each and figured out how to get a neon-like glow on them. Rather than using any fancy particle systems or writing shaders, I simply added bloom in Unity's post-processing, and added a second version of each shape on top, which was dark grey, and overlapped the bright object, leaving just the outline effect. I'll play a clip of each mob's mechanics in the background while I talk. I messed around a lot with the player's code for movement and shooting. I couldn't get it to feel quite right for a long time. The bullets worked great, but the movement was just a little stuttery, and I couldn't figure out why, so I moved on to creating the bullet trails. I then made the rooms. Originally my game plan was to have 3 enemies with 3 tiers, and the player with 3 tiers as well, with rooms that you could explore and dip in and out of freely to train up for the next challenge, with a big boss at the end. But the scope was way too big for the jam's window, especially as I was busy for one of the days within the 72 hours. I cut down the scope for 2 tiers for each mob and no boss, with hexagons marked down as an optional enemy, if I had time. I decided on having 4 set rooms too. When you cleared all of the enemies, the next door would open, and you'd travel through and do it over again with harder enemies. Since there was no boss, I decided to make the last room an endless one, and added some simple scores at the end, like total kills, individual kills, and the time that you'd survived. With the game starting to actually feel like a game, I wanted to expand on the mechanics and difficulty a bit. I added the tier 2 triangles and squares into the game. The original tier 2 square idea was to make the square fire off in all 4 directions, with one always facing the player, and chasing them the same as the tier 1 does. But when programming it, I accidentally set it to fire at the player from all directions, and it made a crazy barrage of bullets flying towards the player. It looked a bit odd, but I liked it, so I kept it in. As for the tier 2 triangle, I wanted to combine the tier 1 triangle and the tier 1 squares mechanics. The original idea was to have the triangle chase the player like the tier 1 triangle does. If they hit them, then switch to firing bullets. But this just felt like a bigger tier 1 triangle unless it actually hit you. So I redesigned it and made it so when you shoot it, it becomes immune for a small duration, and during that time will fly a lot faster towards the player. They try and melee them. Whenever it isn't in melee mode, it will chase the player and fire at them quite rapidly. Further into my development that I like to admit, I finally found the cause for the stuttering movement issue I had at the start of the project, and fixed it immediately. The game was finally coming together. I needed a way of adding a tutorial into the game, but I didn't want walls of text to overwhelm the player at the beginning. So I made a small cutscene script, and made it so that when a new mob type spawns, a cutscene will trigger, to show the player what has spawned and to tell them what it does. I then incorporated this system into entering the next room, so rather than just killing everything and moving awkwardly into the next room, when you kill everything it triggers a cutscene of the player leaving the current room and entering the next, with the door closing behind them. Since everything was coming together now, and the gameplay felt right, with around 13 hours remaining, I figured it was plenty of time to add the 2 last mobs. The originally planned hexagons came to life. I took the original tier 2 square idea and developed it further by making it fire out of all 6 sides of the hexagon, and turned it into a stationary turret with high HP. I finished the game and submitted it with just under 10 hours remaining. I had made a WebGL build as well as a Windows build, but unfortunately the framerate was destroyed in the web version. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I'm assuming it was something to do with either the particles or the post-processing. Either way, I didn't really have time to fix the issue, so I removed the web build for now. I must have played the game over 100 times at least during development, so I slowly got better and better at my own game. I didn't really take much notice of my score until after making the final build, so maybe I actually beat my own score, but here's my score on my last test. Go see if you can beat it. Thanks to everyone who rated and played my game, and well done to everyone else that entered the jam. A big thanks to Icoso for hosting the jam. It was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. Thanks for watching.